Welcome to The Human Code, the podcast where technology meets humanity, and the future is shaped by the leaders and innovators of today. I'm your host, Don Finley, inviting you on a journey through the fascinating world of tech, leadership, and personal growth. Here, we delve into the stories of visionary minds who are not only driving technological advancement, but also embodying the personal journeys and insights that inspire us all. Each episode, we explore the intersections where human ingenuity meets the cutting edge of technology, unpacking the experiences, challenges, and triumphs that define our era. So, whether you're a tech enthusiast, an inspiring entrepreneur, or simply curious about the human narratives behind the digital revolution, you're in the right place. Welcome to The Human Code. I'm here with PV Kannan, and he is the CEO of 24/7 AI, an innovative company that is doing some work with both generative AI and also the customer service experience and customer contact. I have an idea that we're just going to have an interesting conversation about how the world is interacting with AI and how a company like 24/7, which has been around for now 24 years,
Yep.
congratulations, has also morphed through that time and seeing how technology and humanity play together. So, PV, thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule to chat, and really curious about what's gotten you to today.
First of all, thanks, Don, for having me on this podcast. Really excited to spend some time with you. What got me here is my interest in the area of customer service. It's one of these unique things that we have mastered in the last few decades where this didn't exist in the ancient societies, right? No one went around saying, hey, I'm going to sell you something, and then you are bound by this unwritten contract that anytime I have a question, I can call you and you will take care of things for me, right? So it's a relatively new thing. And my interest came when I was in college, and I grew up in Chennai in India. And remember going to the American consulate. The consulates of the US across the world also typically tend to have a large library where you can access the latest books and textbooks. So I happened to go to the American consulate in Chennai and happened upon this book called In Search of Excellence, which was one of the books written by Tom Peters. It was a runaway success in the 80s. I think it was the first business book to sell 1 million copies or something like that, right? So it had this little book, and I remember reading it and just being influenced by how great brands were built just on this notion of being there for the customer, right? And my favorite story in that book was someone goes and returns a tire to Nordstrom, and the founder of Nordstrom, the employee goes and says, hey, this guy wants to return a tire, and we don't even sell tires. And apparently the founder goes, it's okay. We're here for the customer. Just take it back and give him a refund, right? So extreme case of customer service, right? And then obviously, a few years later, I immigrate to the US. And what was in the book was so amazing in real world. Obviously, that was not what's going on in other brands, right? So you had not the world in those days. And then eventually, today you have brands like Southwest and, a few other brands that have this culture of extreme passion for customers. And I would put Target, Walmart in that bucket. And so you have all these brands. But when I came to this country, I was like, oh, wow, look at all these brands doing it in distinct ways, not everyone with the same passion. But also for me, it was in that how technology played to have no role in this equation. So when I immigrated in 91, it was like you call the 800 number and then go through this roll of the dice experience, right?
Yeah.
You got an experienced agent and it was just fantastic. Or you just get a rookie agent and that person is learning from you as opposed to you getting what you want, right? And it so happened with my background in software development, I was assigned to a project and we were just launching the project and it was in the analysis phase. And I put my hand and I said, I will actually look after the customer service piece of it, right? And it got me into the world of going and supporting contact center for an electric utility in the Northwest, right? And then I got immersed into it and then I got hooked by it. I really liked that these centers are massive. Many employ thousands of employees and all day long, they take on this task of, I mean, I always say no one wakes up and says, I'm going to call AT&T today because I'm so happy with the service they're providing, right? By definition, a person calling in is either neutral, right? And most often a little ticked off.
They got a problem
Um,
that needs to be solved,
they
right?
got something that needs to be done, and you're coming in the way actually of their day.
Yeah.
And so it's fascinating that a lot of the thinking in the first company was really how do we systematically take away all the questions you get asked, and how can we leverage technology? Why is it a phone call? Why can't it be a chat? And why can't it be chat that's super smart? Why can't that conversation be where I know all the context of what's going on with you interacting with my brand and my assets like the website or the app? So I smartly leverage that information because customers already think that you're watching them constantly, you're like stealing all their data and things like
Yeah.
that. But do it for a positive intent, which is I don't want to ask you your name. I don't need to ask you to validate. You're already logged on to the website. You just started chatting with me. I should say something like, Don, I notice you're looking at hotels in London, but you just click to chat with me. Tell me what you need, right? And that's kind of the human element where technology kind of supports the agent in just providing, get to the, issue quickly. Because I don't think any customer gains anything when they're having this conversation saying, what's your name? Don. Okay, what's your account number? You don't gain anything in that period of time, right? You want to start the conversation by saying, hey, I'm looking for a hotels in London. What I'm looking for is one that's dog friendly and next to a park where I can take it for a walk and blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. And the agent goes, give me a couple of minutes, searches and says, I think let's take a look at these two locations,
Yes.
right? And so the idea for me when I started the first company and the second company, which is more on the services side combined with technology, is how do we bring it? How do we orchestrate data, technology, and a human centric philosophy into delivering a service where both the company, the brand that's delivering it, and the consumer receiving it go, this is different. And I want everything like this, right?
How are
So that's kind of
consumers?
how, where I ended up here
I
today.
love that. And I would love to dig into this because I think the three pillars that you just defined, like data, tech, and the human centric component to it, that can lay out a nice, like, technical foundation. The experiential foundation of it around what makes, like, passionate customer service work. Where do you see that component playing out, which I guess is really the human centric aspect of
Yes,
this?
yes, because that goes into things like what is the psychology of the consumer? What is the psychology agent? Because often forgotten in all of this, you don't see that many books written about what is the life of an agent? What do they go through? How do they wake up and come to work? I mean, that's the biggest part of the success when someone is chatting, right? So I can enable an agent by saying, hey, Don is looking at hotels in London. But if I ignore that information, it doesn't matter. Or you tell them that, hey, our brand represents being friendly. And then you say something, and I'm like, oh God, Don, he's just complaining. And I don't know why I'm dealing with this. Seriously, this is like a 1% problem. And why am I doing it?
Yeah.
Right. So I put it in that bucket because I think just dealing with folks who are in the front lines and having empathy for them from a design and data perspective and reducing the amount of work they need to do is actually part of that human component for me. It's not just the human being the customer, right? It's like all the humans orchestrating it. You have the frontline agent who's talking to you. You have supervisors who are ensuring the operation is running well. And then you have people who care about the program going, how's it going for us today, right? All of those layers need to kind of come together. But the key component is really the customer and the person talking to them. And that's where bulk of the heavy lifting gets done.
If I was to paraphrase, it kind of sounds like you're coming across the idea that technology is an aid that helps to reduce friction amongst what is human communication and kind of
That's
like
correct. Both.
yeah, looking to be of service to another individual that has a need.
Absolutely. Take away the friction for the consumer in starting the conversation and then take away all the friction for the agent to quickly understand what is it that the customer is trying to do. And then once that happens, then you let the process follow through, right?
Yeah.
In all our data, looking just at the data and going, what makes a customer who started off kind of in a bad mood, or their voice or whatever their mannerism in the text was, I'm annoyed and I'm starting this conversation with you, quickly jump into, actually, this is not bad. I'm getting what I want. The biggest thing is, how quickly does the agent go, Don, this is what you're trying to do? Yes. And you say yes. The sooner you get to that point, hopefully less than 30 seconds, you start feeling reassured. Okay, I think I'm in good hands, right? And where the friction gets really bad is after a minute into the conversation, both of you are still like talking Hindi and Greek. And you're like, both sides are like, what's going on, right?
Oh, yeah. And that's
And
sometimes
you've
like the
lost it.
worst experience that you can have is when you're just trying to express your problem and
Correct.
it's not being heard, right? Like, and I think that's kind of
That's exactly right.
a common human relationship as well, whether it's with a company or not, but being able to share some bit of language that expresses like, hey, here's what I'm trying to communicate. And I can tell you some of my worst customer experience problems have been when I've explained it to one person, then have to explain it to another person. And I think we can all understand that that's usually the cable company that
Yes.
happens with, right? Like these are some areas that we've all kind of had some frustration, but I will say it is getting better. And on that note, knowing that you have, I mean, 30 plus years, it sounds like, in
Yep.
this field, how has technology changed those conversations over that time?
Okay. That's a great question. And I'll give you some examples and then we'll talk through it. You just talked about the fact that the frustration of telling the agent what you're trying to do, right? We call it intent,
Yeah.
right? And so the reason I wrote the book, The Age of Intent, is I'm very passionate about the fact is, instead of doing all the bells and whistles with technology, which don't add much value, if brands can invest in getting the intent right the first time without passing it off to another agent, another agent, another agent, where you're repeating the same story, right? So a story becomes an intent, right?
Mhm.
The customer describes the problem as a story. They go, hey, I'm trying to go from A to B. I'm trying to go for a wedding. And then this happened. And now I'm unable to go, right? It's a story. You don't go and say, you don't say it in the brand's language that there is a flight disruption, right? That's what the brand expects you to say.
Yeah.
They've trained the agent saying, oh, if there is a flight disruption, no, allow the customer to tell their story. Let them take their time, right? Part of it is also you're kind of going, I went through this. I need to share this with someone. I can't call my mom because she doesn't want to hear about it. So I'm calling you. But anyway, you created the problem. So you own it, right? I'm telling you the story. So the biggest technology development today in the AI is, yeah, I can take a big story like that and go, flight disruption.
Yes.
Don is having a flight disruption. And then, oh, by the way, he's in Chicago. Take all the pieces of information. So today, technology can do that, which is why you're seeing maybe the number of transfers go down, because now we can send you to the right person who can handle it, right? Because when you let customers pick the problem in crazy tree-based, press one for this, or tell me your problem, and you say, hey, I was flying, and the technology goes, well, something to do with flights. Maybe he wants to buy a flight. That's how rudimentary it was 15 years back, right?
Yeah.
Today, the technology is advanced where you tell a story for 3 minutes and it goes, okay, I got it. It's actually about this. Now I can send you to the right person. But oh, by the way, I can take all the stuff you told me and put that context for the agent. So when the agent receives it, he or she knows, hey, it's Don. Don's having this issue. Don's confirmation number is this. So you don't ask those questions, right? So that's how that experience is
So
getting
this is
better and better.
so my common experience, right, 15 years ago
Mhm.
was basically jamming on the 0 button as fast as
Yes.
I could, right? Because it was going through the IVR tree system and
Yep.
you didn't know if you were going to end up in the right branch of the tree or whatever, but you wanted to get to a human almost as soon as possible.
Yep.
And then being part of the development of some of those systems, like you saw the work that went into trying to get the tree right. But like you're saying, the technology just wasn't as consumer friendly. Today, you're saying that you have systems where it can listen to me ramble on for 3
Yes.
minutes, and maybe I'm telling you a story about my problem, but also sprinkled in there, there's stories about my family and the disruption it's
Yep.
had with that. And the AI is picking up on the salient points of information and driving that to the right person. So now we're no longer talking about having the tree, but more of like a community in which the AI is
That's
like
right.
the conductor of saying, you know what, you're better served going to claims. You're better going to
Correct.
this department. And additionally pulling out the relevant context for that.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to need a list of your customers, so that if I ever have a problem, I know that I don't have to just jam on the 0 button.
That's
They go,
right.
I'll actually
But
like participate.
it goes back to what we talked about, right? Technology,
Yeah.
which is the AI piece and blah, 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 which is able to translate a story into an intent. The data, which is the context, right? Hey, the intent is this, but I need to know your reservation number, confirmation number, account number. I need to know where you are, and I need to know how many passengers are traveling. All that data, the more I can pull it from the website when you were searching, the more I can pull out from the conversation. All that is what makes the thing more easy when it finally the actual action happens, right? Otherwise, you're spending more time doing that
Yeah.
and less time actually solving the problem, right?
And
And in the meanwhile, you get shuttled around because you didn't land in the right place.
well, and that's you're hitting on this, and maybe if I can, I'm going to try to
Yep.
spin it because I missed this at first, and I want to make sure that we get this point across.
Hmm.
You're talking about a business and a brand isn't 5 separate things. It's one element to a consumer. And so if
Yes,
you're doing something on the website, that brand needs to know when you call their customer service about that holistic experience that you're having in that relationship. And I think we're starting to get to the point where AI is allowing us to have a cohesive collection of information and processing along, allowing
that's
that one
correct.
brand experience to be
That's
prevalent
correct.
through your interaction.
That's correct. And you see a lot of it. And if you've ever used an electric car, you kind of see that's kind of the way I explain sometimes to people. You have the traditional car, you came in, and if it's a little bit, you paid a little bit more, you can press like I am number two in the seat, and the seat will adjust. Right? In an electric car, because it's so software first up developed,
Yeah.
you walk in just by your phone and your phone's proximity versus your spouse, that you're in the driver's seat, it goes, oh, I need to adjust to PV setting, right? And I need to pair to his phone. I need to play music from his phone, right? And so that's what you get when technology gets smart and you have more ability to sense things, right?
Ah, I love it.
And, and so I do think, and by the way, we are not done yet, right? Because then what is happening increasingly is, hey, why do I need to take this problem to an agent if it's simple enough? Like, oh, you need your flight rerouted. I know how to do it with modern APIs. I can go figure out if a flight is available. And if it's quick, I just do it. Right. Now, there are harder issues, and we'll state of the travel example. What if I'm traveling with my spouse, but I booked the spouse's ticket using miles, which don't have the privilege as my ticket, which may have a status. And now the automated system says, okay, you get this, but your wife's going to travel tomorrow. And you're like, no, 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 no. And that's where an agent can go, okay, that logic works for some people, but not you because you're
Yeah.
traveling as a family, even though you have two different reservations, right? Because one was booked with miles and one was booked with status and cash or whatever. And that's where, even if it goes to an agent, if that's understood, otherwise, think about even explaining it to an agent. You're like, hey, my flight got canceled. Here's my thing. Oh, by the way, I'm traveling with my wife. And the guy's like, wait, wait, wait. Let me handle this. No, you have to handle it together.
Exactly. This is one experience for me. And I know it's in your system
Correct.
is two different things, but at the same time,
That's right.
and I think you hit a point on the AI side of this where
Yep.
today's systems are really good at kind of like breaking down information, parsing it, categorizing it, showing like early signs of reasoning and logic in our
Yep.
LLMs, right? There's other systems that we
Yep.
can bring in that help to do that, but then we're talking about agentic AI, right? Like where you're giving it a
Hmm.
goal and it's looking to actually like accomplish a task for you. Not so
Yep.
much just get you to the right direction or say, more like pass a test, right? Like, am I getting you to the
Yep.
right
Yep.
location? But hey, can I actually drive the car? Right? Can I get
Hmm.
you your reservation changed? And even on the more complicated states of I've got two people on two different things, but they're traveling together. That that's going to be one of those cases where it may either be that the AI can handle it right away or that it's going to be something
Yep.
that has to
Yep.
see over time.
It is going to take, and in the most fascinating aspect about all of this is people forget customer service is directly linked to rate of change in an industry, right? So take electric utilities in the US,
Okay.
right? Nothing has changed. I mean, we have solar and all of that, but your relationship to the electric utility is the same as it was 25 years back, except now you can view your bill online. Big deal, right? That's pretty much the only change. There's nothing else that's changed. So if your power goes down, you can call them and it'll say, hey, I recognize your number. I'll note it down and I'll call you back when power comes on,
Yeah.
right? Now, oftentimes it calls 10 minutes after the power has come and you know it because you're in the
As
house.
you
So
yeah,
it's,
exactly.
so yes, smart meters, but smart meters is more helping the utility than you, right? So I give that as an example because if you look at the problem types that an agent has, forget solar power for a minute, it's pretty static to what an agent experienced 20 years back, right? And so these electric utilities don't have large number of people in the call center because they don't need to. I mean, most customers know power goes out. There's no big problem that you're going to call like what I just described with the United Airlines or any airline.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen, right? So that industry by nature in the US, it's different in Europe. It's a lot more dynamic. You can buy power from multiple companies, so it's competitive field,
Ah,
right? So in UK, for instance, they have a lot more agents because they have to retain their customer. Here, it's a monopoly,
yeah.
right? So there, it's like a telephone, right? A mobile phone. I can switch carriers, and so that adds a dynamic. So when you think about automated system, they'll do really well in a monopoly static industry because you can nail the problem, like you said,
Yep.
and nothing changes or very little changes, right? Where I think automated systems struggle is when the rate of change is so high, where are you going to learn that change? Someone has to then manually program it. And once you manually programming it, you're messing it up, right? So that's why you have this gap, and you can actually say whether an industry is dynamic or not by how much that gap exists. The gap is actually a good thing. It means the consumers are benefiting from the competition, right? The day Amazon.com says, I've automated everything, we know as consumers, we are dead,
That's true.
right?
That
That means
really
they have
is
a
true.
complete
Yeah.
stranglehold on everything. They don't need to innovate. They don't need to do anything because they're like, hey, this is what we give you. And that's what monopolies tell you, right? This is what you have. I'm not going to do anything for you. I'm not going to come with any clever idea. And all I'll do is every year I'll increase your prices, right? So, so
Yes.
in a way, very ironically, bad customer service is not really bad unless it's an incompetent company. When automation doesn't serve needs, it means the industry is actually dynamic and things are changing, right? And so that's something to keep in mind because people are like, why is it not perfect? I'm like, you don't want it to be perfect. That's a bad thing as a consumer to desire. Like, I want every problem to be solved. Good, then you're working for a monopoly. You're not a customer.
Well, and that's kind of the thing. My world doesn't get better unless I have problems. Problems and opportunities are the exact same thing. It's just
It
your
is.
perspective as far as it goes. Now, when my power goes out, that feels like a real problem for me. It's definitely an opportunity for the power company. And granted, that
Correct.
doesn't happen. I mean, in the last 10
Ever.
years, I think it's happened once, right? Like very there's very reliable services in that area. And like you're saying, it's somewhat of a monopoly because we don't
It
change.
is.
There isn't a customer service need because it is reliable. And additionally, there isn't competition for it. So we might be paying a little bit more.
And Don, I forgot you're in Philadelphia. I'm in California, so our power situation is different.
Oh,
So we do have
total.
frequent power cuts.
That's right.
That's why I gave you that example. Now I moved to solar, by the way, because
Okay.
the power company is not responsive. They're a monopoly, right?
Yeah.
They really don't care. They'll be like, hey, we think some fire is going to come. We're just going to cut it off proactively. No, you're not doing it proactively. You're just hurting me. If you're proactive, you'll say, hey, it's the fire is 1 mile away. I'm going to cut it, or 10 miles away, right? If there's a fire 600 miles away, why are you cutting my power, right? So anyway, so my point is, you're right. Maybe for you and the viewers, probably, or the listeners, the electric utility may not be that relevant unless you live in California. Then the example will hit
We
home.
at California. Also, I have some team members in Ecuador, and
Wow.
currently they're cutting power for a quarter of the country at a time for a
Wow.
total of 6 hours every day, right? They do 3
Wow.
hours overnight and 3 hours during it. So some of our team members are working from the mall because it's the only
God.
place they can get power and internet at the same time. And like, it is fascinating. We also have team members in Egypt, and power outages are somewhat they're frequent enough to where it's not, unheard of, right? Like, so it's very
Got
much in
it.
that
Got
same
it.
space. But I think it goes to show both the responsibility of the brand and additionally of your customer service organization as far as how you communicate that and then the relationships that you build. What I love about
Yep.
the work you're doing is that it has there's always that human connection to it. Now,
Yes.
there's a lot of unfortunate fear in the space today based on like what we're seeing with AI. We've been doing
Right.
AI development for the last over 10 years now.
Mhm.
And I personally have my undergrad degree with computer science and a focus on AI. And so I knew about neural nets in the early 2000s. We just didn't have the
Mhm.
compute power, the data to really be doing it. In the last 2 years, my own personal opinion on where I thought we were gonna automate away jobs was gonna be in trucking, self-driving, and then
Right.
additionally in more blue collar type of jobs. Well, what we've seen with ChatGPT and the explosion of LLMs has really pushed that paradigm to like really a lot of white collar jobs are going to
Yep.
benefit,
Yep.
but also demand could disappear for some of them. Where do you see the world playing out in regards to how AI is going to impact the employment market?
Right. That's a really good question. Now, whenever we talk about productivity improvement in general, right? Implicit in that is if a company has 100 employees and productivity improves 20%, then by definition, 20 people can be removed from the system, right?
I mean, that's a
And so,
do you really buy into that?
no, I'm just saying if indeed really, and where it's, here is the funny thing, Don, like other than contact centers, you really cannot measure productivity in many jobs.
Yeah.
People talk about productivity. You cannot measure it, right? And so if I'm a developer and ChatGPT helps me develop faster by 40%, I may not give it back to the company. I may give that time to watching Netflix. Right? So because you as a manager said, hey, PV, I need this done by Tuesday, and I'm done by Monday, I may not call you and say, hey, I'm done, right? So, there is not the level of measurement unless you start monitoring and checking like, hey, because we can monitor everything too today,
Exactly. We can
by
totally monitor
definition.
what people are doing. We're switching our compensation structure around our development teams for more being value based than trying to be
Right,
hourly and somewhat even on our salary side, providing bonuses for productivity enhancement so that both sides
right.
feel it. The pushback that I have on when we say that a project is going to save, let's say 40% of labor. And like we've
Hmm.
done these projects before. I have a customer that saved 80% on their labor because we implemented an IoT platform that allowed them to know
Got it.
exactly where things were. Not one person was fired from that company. The
No, that's great. and also whether the company is growing or not,
And
so
two things played into it. They were understaffed significantly.
yes,
And
yes.
then
So
additionally, there was also work that wasn't getting done that they wanted to do. And so they basically shifted the roles of those people.
correct, correct.
Do you see
And
AI changing any of this kind of like calculus or?
look, the one thing I'm very confident is nothing dramatic is going to happen. When I immigrated in the 90s, there was a book written in, I believe it was 95 or 96. And you can Google it and look at it. It's called The Death of the American Programmer or something like that. And it basically said people in India and China can program as good as anyone in the US. So US companies are going to go and, do everything there and going to be horrible, blah, blah, blah. And it created a sensation briefly in Business Week and
Yeah.
became a little bit of like, I think Business Week wrote an article going to Microsoft saying, how many employees do you have in India? How many do you have in China? And all of that. Took a little nasty turn, to the side. But we know what it is 30 years later, right?
Yes.
We can't find developers in Silicon Valley. And we have millions of people in India and China actually working for US companies like Microsoft and IBM and others. And yet we still have a labor shortage, right?
Yep.
So we have developers in Toronto, Bangalore, and San Jose. Everywhere we have more open positions than filled ones, right? This is 30 years later. So I always caution people when they look at a piece of technology. And for me, technology, like in our spaces, it's technology, data, and people, right? And so, coming back, I don't think anything dramatic is going to happen as people always envision. Now, what happened if we only relied on US programmers and we took a stand in the 90s after reading that book? Can be offshored, right? We would have zero global companies selling technology because we wouldn't have had the talent to develop products to meet the needs of every country in the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we couldn't have developed Chinese version of Windows. We couldn't have developed versions for Europe, right? So we couldn't have had the manpower to even take care of all the functionality requirements from different societies and going, oh, in Europe, they or do the things differently. So I need to have the UI accommodate some things. You needed the manpower simply to say, build everything that we have today. If we had only relied on US, there would be no Tesla, there would be no ChatGPT,
Yeah.
because we would have moved at such a slow pace, right? So for me, the better question to ask is, what are things that are going to happen if I have unlimited labor for almost free? Right. So if you're a company and someone comes and says, what's constraining you? Well, I have 5,000 guys and I'm developing 10 products. Can you develop 25 products? Now that pretty much everything is like running water, what would you do? Right. And and that's what happened with running water, right? At one point we didn't have enough to drink. And now we have enough that we do golf courses and plant vineyards and do something, right?
Yeah.
I would view it that way because every time in the last 30 years, which is where I see more technology change happen than the preceding 50, not to underplay the impact of what the technologies mean, right? But I always say whenever people have said it's going to like end jobs or all this thing is going to go away, it always takes a turn, a surprising turn, an unexpected turn. And for me, I would rather think about that rather than go, like, let me tell you, in 24/7, we are leveraging ChatGPT for code development for
Yeah.
projects, right? We have no plans to reduce our headcount, right? It's more about we're like platforms. We're doing things which we couldn't have done.
Exactly what we were talking about, right? Like even if you
Yeah,
have a 50% increase in productivity, you
you'll
still
you'll
have
end up using it elsewhere. Yeah,
exactly. And you
you,
want to
you'll
retain
do
that
new
talent
things, and yeah,
that you
yeah.
have, right?
But on the other hand, if you're a company going through trouble, then you may do cuts, right? Maybe your business is not going to be around because technology is taking away
And
your market.
you might just be right sizing to make the need.
Exactly.
But I think you're hitting on another key point here is that there is definitely going to be opportunity. The opportunity isn't going to look the same as it was before. If your cost of intelligence is being driven to zero, which effectively is
Yes,
what we're doing with AI, right? Like the opportunity for you to be building something that was never imagined before is there, is going to be there. And just like
that's it.
we would never have envisioned Instagram before we had a
Yes,
smartphone and before we had 4G, were really the two
Correct.
things that helped to bring that to market. There's
Correct.
opportunities for AI and, business and everybody, and I that didn't exist 2
That's
years
correct.
ago. But I also am really excited for your field because you're sitting at the forefront of really what is that human interaction with what we're doing. And so, like, you're using ChatGPT for some of your development. I imagine you're
Yep.
using LLMs in some of your customer service as well.
Yep. For the figuring out intent, we
Yep.
just talked about it. So we are improving the intent recognition by layering LLMs, right?
Yeah.
To the older AI models. So, and we are squeezing more juice out of it, right?
Mm.
So you're right. We're going to be touching every part of our business from finance to HR to go, hey, how do we leverage it?
Yeah.
Right. And then I'm telling people, then think about expansively, now that you've got this additional capacity in your department, what else can we do? Right.
Yep.
And so that's my view that I don't think, look, the other thing is if you play around the pessimistic path for and play it out. So where do we go? So 80% of the people in any country, forget about the US, is unemployed. And the thing I hate about the universal basic income is not that we don't want to help people. It's like, who decides I am part of the 20% that will think and work, and you're part of the 80% who should stay home and I'll just send you a check? I mean,
I gotta say, look,
how much arrogance should you have to say, I mean, that to me is the old feudalism. That's the old caste system, right?
well,
I mean,
I
that's,
think that universal I love that interpretation of it because it is I see that point of view.
I totally do.
But there's
From a
also
humanistic,
if you look at the research of what happens from UBI as far as like if you just give everybody, it's everybody gets the
right,
money,
right.
right? But what you
Yep.
find is that parents end up staying home with their children, right? Then additionally, people who may not have been in a career that they liked go back to school. They go for an
Right,
education.
right.
I don't know if it's the right way to go, but I do agree with you that like there is kind of this problem of if we get to a point of, let's say, 30 to 50% unemployment, which is probably, I mean, that's not the worst case scenario. But if there is an innovation that comes by, and since technology is going faster and faster as far as the rate of change goes, which is bringing on more innovation for us, we're going to have to innovate on our social services as well.
Yeah.
But in the
No,
same,
sorry, I agree with
no, but
you.
I also want to bring this back because what you've been sharing has been absolutely amazing from the standpoint of like, there is opportunity here and there is opportunity for everyone in this. And
Exactly.
that's the place to be.
I think spending too much time on this, oh, it's going to take away jobs and all of that is just a waste of time, right? It's going to play out.
Yeah.
And the way it's going to play out is more smart people are going to go, I'm creating excess capacity that now I can leverage. And at a cost point that I can actually invent more things. And we underestimate it every single time. Our society has gone through massive changes, right? Everyone was in the field getting food for mostly for themselves,
Yeah.
right?
We didn't have a
80,
9 to
90% of
5.
the population.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then what happened? Like in less than 50 years, 100 people working in the field, already 95, 5. Suddenly 95 is in somewhere else and automation took. No one sat there and went like, if the society didn't evolve for the farmers to go do other things, of course we would have rioted back then. We may have never got to this point. But what is great about the way human beings think and act and do is we take always that surplus and push it forward and grow it, as opposed to going into this, hey, we have fired all the farmers. Great. Who's going to eat your grain?
Yep.
If you fired all the farmers.
Exactly.
So it's that thinking that just gets me, right?
Man, I
That
I
you
love
got
this
your
because we're talking about something that's human ingenuity, right? Like
Mhm.
it's that factor that kind of comes in. And ingenuity doesn't have to have the word human in front of it, but it seems so core to what we're talking about, where there's opportunities in the problem. And it goes back to that stoic principle of the obstacle is the way as
Yep.
well. And so
Yep.
like you see the problem, we solve the problem. And like we probably both play around with a lot of AI. And like I haven't seen that sort of like creative push from an AI to really kind of like own a problem, own an opportunity, and be like the champion of maybe we'll get there someday, but I think this is still where the opportunity exists of being able to be someone that can garner resources and understand how to put them together. For anybody who's like of our younger listeners kind of thing, like let's say college age, getting prepared for their
Right.
career, what advice do you have in this time of change?
I think when, I was younger and fascinated with technology, I spent way too much time, obsessing about technology, which I think is right because you want to learn it, you want to master it, right? I always tell young people to kind of look at the human side attached to the technology, whatever it is, right? I'm using a computer, I'm a user. What is my point of view, right? It doesn't matter. Everywhere there is a human counterpart to technology, right? And just understanding it, how it impacts the different stakeholders is something you appreciate much later in life from experience, right? In my 20s, I used to be like walking around talking to clients and saying, this technology is fascinating. I'm like, how come you're not getting it? We should just move to this without like going, why is a business in business? It's there to serve a customer. And what is it that they actually get from your product? And how do I make that product better? How do I make that service better? How do I do and then in solving those problems, then you go, this technology is awesome for doing that.
Yes.
Right. Versus what we're doing today again with the LLMs, which is I have this amazing technology. Now let me go do it here. No, what is it that's it's gonna do? End of the day, if I get a crappy product from you, I don't care if you use the LLMs for design.
Yeah.
If your product is crappy, right? I don't care you use LLM for advertisement if your service doesn't work, right? And so I would advise, the young people to really like focus on what are the problems that are being solved, what are the needs that are being met and unmet, and spend time and work backwards towards the technology. Right.
Ah, that's fantastic. I really appreciate the customer focus, the human focus on this, and kind of like technology is just an aid to get you there.
Yeah.
And so that's really insightful. Thank you for sharing.
Thanks,
If
Don.
our listeners wanted to reach out, is there any way to contact you?
I'm available on social media. And so I'm very responsive if you reach out in LinkedIn, Twitter, whatever is your favorite
Fantastic.
social media platform. So
Again, thank you so much. Really appreciate you taking the time. And I think the one thing that I'm getting from this today is it's still all about the human connection.
absolutely.
Thank you.
Thanks, Don.
Thank you for tuning into The Human Code, sponsored by Findustries, where we harness AI to elevate your business. By improving operational efficiency and accelerating growth, we turn opportunities into reality. Let Findustries be your guide to AI mastery, making success inevitable. Explore how at findustries.co.